the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactful Living podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Wilton, joined by Sergeant Wilton. Clint, how are you?
I'm excellent.
I want to talk about why I see a lot of good cops that are quietly walking away from law enforcement.
It's such a bad environment in so many different aspects, whether you're looking at the societal pushback, the governmental pushback. There's people are just getting fed up and it's not worth the risk. I mean, officers are going out and laying their lives out on the line every day for them to be one of the most hated people in their minds in our society nowadays and being targeted on such a regular basis. So I think that you're seeing people saying, everyone says, oh, well, that's what you signed up for. Well, there's a lot of officers who go, this isn't what I signed up for. And that's why they're walking away.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of break things down in the reality of how they actually are on the landscape. And it's not because they stopped caring. It's not because the job got too dangerous, but it's because the weight of that feeling of being unsupported and undervalued, it gets to a point to where things are far heavier than that calling.
And that's where it's such a hard environment. And, you talked about, like when I first started, it's changed so astronomically, and it really has. I mean, especially in our state, we've decriminalized so much, and we're the ones having to bear the brunt of it because people still call us. They want us to fix their problems, and their house is broken into, and everything is taken from them, and we have to go, okay, well, we're going to investigate this. And then once we investigate it, find the suspect, get them identified. They're out just as soon as we book them in. And it's such the system is broken by so many means. And because we've politicized that system so much, and we've politicized the us versus them mentality so much more, it's burning people out.
The psychological concept here is disengagement through moral exhaustion. And it happens when individuals basically repeatedly experience that conflict between their personal values and the environment that they're in. And for law enforcement, this can mean watching policy decisions undermine the mission, and a lot of the times feeling unsupported after a critical incident.
And that's one of the big things is, especially after a critical incident, like we had an officer decertified just recently based off of some poor choices he made, but it's still something where there's all these implementation processes. There's so many things that we have to do now that I never even considered us having to do because of the political dynamics, like having to track when we have a proactive stop or any type of policing efforts of we have to stat, okay, what race they are, what age they are, what sex they are, and what kind of contact it was. We have to start tracking that on such a regular basis to where those people who got that implemented are saying, see, this program hasn't helped cops be less racist. This is just highlighting how racist cops are. And in all reality, it has nothing to do with that at all.
Yeah, and something that I've seen with a lot of people is withdrawing emotionally from the job before making that formal decision to leave. And when that happens, it becomes more dangerous for that officer and their partners. Because one, you start second guessing your decisions out there on a regular basis. And when you start second guessing yourself, that starts leading to mistakes and errors because you're not leaning on your training and of what we've been exposed to going up to that point. And there's that hesitancy is like, well, I don't want to lose my job, or I don't want to be sued. I don't want to be labeled as a racist or as someone who can't effectively perform these duties. I believe one of the leading causes of good officers choosing to leave has everything to do with admin. And I can say that because all of the other pressures, they're very universal when it comes to things across the board with our nation. But those that I've seen that stick it out, they usually have great support from their admin. And those that are choosing to leave, they often feel abandoned by the institution that they served faithfully. And loyalty without reciprocity, it's going to eventually run out.
I've been through numerous administrations within our department, the good ones, bad ones, and kind of indifferent ones. And it weighs a lot on you when you have, especially those bad ones, but also those indifferent ones, because when you don't feel like they're present, they're providing for you to be able to lead effectively, you start second guessing your own decisions. And that's what you start seeing administrative people start that trickle down effect of no one wants to make a decision because they're always in fear that it's going to be the wrong one.
Something else that I've seen is that public narrative has made the job feel like it's thankless. And I think that morale can have a very hard time being able to survive indefinitely without acknowledgement.
And that's why it's so good to be involved in your community and be involved with, everything with it. There's going to be naysayers. You're never going to be able to get away from those naysayers. I mean, historically, it's always been there. You're going to have varying opinions on things. But you would ultimately be surprised on how many people truly support you as a law enforcement officer. And I think, and we've talked about this before, is, when someone says, thank you for your service, and we almost belittle it by saying, oh, well, it's the job I signed up for, or we're not accepting that gratitude. It's hard for us to accept that. But if you really start breaking down that support that's truly out there, it's actually pretty high on how many people love us.
Another reason why these good officers are choosing to leave is because they're watching peers leave and then deciding that they're next. And I think that attrition becomes contagious when good people go first.
You start losing your partners, your brothers or sisters that you go out and work with on a regular basis, and it starts becoming an environment that you don't recognize anymore, and sometimes it's easier to remove yourself from that environment to go find another circle, because maybe you're not fitting into that specific group. And when you do that, you start seeing this kind of trickle down effect, because you're saying, oh, well, they went over there, I should go over there too. They're my friend, they're my ally. And then you guys go over there together, and it's creating this understanding of, well, the grass can be greener on the other side, when in reality it not always is.
Yeah, they say the grass is greener where you water it. And I think that something that officers need to hear before making that decision is that leaving is not failure, but make sure that it's a choice and not a collapse, because decisions made from exhaustion deserve a second look. Something that I recommend to clients or people who reach out to me who are in this situation is to go as far as you can without signing on the dotted line. An example of this is, Clint, when your city was going through bankruptcy, you went through the entire process with
multiple agencies.
Well, and settling on the railroad. And it got to the point where, the detective had come to our house and we went through everything, and you got your offer, and the only thing you had to do was literally sign on the dotted line. And it was that reality of getting to that place of weighing out the pros and cons and having a lot of deep conversations around that to decide whether or not this was the move that you should make. And ultimately you decided not to, and it was the right decision.
Yeah. And, there's always that, well, it could have been different. There's so many different variables with it, but it's giving yourself permission to do that. And having, me having such an ally and a support system with Ashley, and being able to talk through this, for us be able to kind of analyze the goods, the bads, the uglies with it, of, is this worth it or is it not? And being able to make that decision, not only on your own, but with your support system, is so important.
And I think it's important to get support before you get out, because any unprocessed burnout, it's going to follow you into the next chapter. So getting real with what's actually going on, for some people, it could be that they are so overweight right now that exhaustion is causing everything to become a trigger at work. And then they might blame that on work instead of something that they could actually start to correct on their own, that in reality might make them feel a little bit more confident, a little bit better when they show up in the uniform.
And that's a huge thing, because how often do we take introspective into ourselves of, what am I doing to change the situation that I'm in? Or are we always pushing that blame onto something else, or to
situations that we can't necessarily control.
I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below, and as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.